Joining us now to discuss it, immigration lawyer and expert Steve Maggi, who came to the United States as a child and went through a years-long process to become a citizen. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning, Steve.
Pleasure to be with you today.
Well, let's get straight to it. The High Court's ruling addressed people who have temporarily protected status, also known as TPS, who've entered the country unlawfully for humanitarian reasons. How are they now impacted with this? Can you break it down for us?
Well, I don't think that anybody was surprised by this decision. All it really said is that if you have TPS, that doesn't mean that you were legally admitted and eligible for a green card. And that's what TPS means. TPS means that you are given temporary protected status because you are from one of 12 countries right now that where people are going through humanitarian crises. So it's people coming in legally and illegally. And those people who can find a remedy, for example, marriage to a US citizen, are still eligible to get their green cards and then eventually to become US citizens. So this is nothing new. If they had actually granted this and allowed people with TPS to automatically be considered admitted and eligible for green cards, it would no longer be temporary protected status. So there was no surprise here in the decision whatsoever. It wouldn't have been fair, really, to all those people who are here to then grant a new status that doesn't apply here. Temporary protected status is sort of like the Dreamers with DACA. You can work and you're protected from deportation, but that's it. It doesn't confer any status on you. So there was no surprise with that decision.
All right, so way to break that down, I can understand a little bit better now. So we understand there are about 400,000 people here in the country from 12 different countries with TPS. Is there anything they need to do since you just broke it down that way? What's next for them?
No, I think the two things they need to do is to make sure that they're not breaking the law, because then they will be deportable. And then they need to be patient. We always talk about what's happening in Congress. I think what's really important here is that they stay in the United States so they can continue to be protected. And then we wait and see if there's any comprehensive immigration reform. So it really hasn't changed for those people. It doesn't make the situation worse. It just hasn't opened the door automatically for them to get green cards.
Steve, I got a quick follow because I need you to break it down because you went through this yourself. And I think under the last administration, there are a lot of things that was said about people who are migrating here to this country, making it seem like it was herds of villains and rapists and things like that. Please break it down for the people who still don't understand that it's not necessarily the attraction of the glitz and glamour of coming here to the United States, but what they're leaving behind that matters to these people. Break that down for us.
Yeah, I think people lose their perspective here. Vice President Harris was talking about not coming, which was a horribly shocking message, because what President Biden said when he was inaugurated was that he was going to reform the asylum system. Asylum is in place for people that actually deserve it. They have what's called a well-founded fear of persecution. They're coming from places where their lives are literally at risk if they are not granted asylum. And it requires them to be at a physical location, like a border crossing or inside the United States, to apply. So for her to say, we don't want you to come, but President Biden saying on January 20th, we want to reform asylum, we want to open our doors to people who qualify, is contradictory, because it's impossible to say don't come when you're required to be at a border crossing or in the United States to actually apply for asylum.
And she's received a lot of backlash from even AOC and some other lawmakers for making that statement, and making a very bold statement at that. Nearly half of the population in Guatemala, particularly, live below the poverty line. So many are, escaping for a better life. While in Guatemala, I want to stay on that, the VP promised help from the U.S. to fight crime and corruption that often drives people from their countries. Will that work, in your opinion?
Absolutely, it will not work. It's very paternalistic and condescending, actually. I'm from Latin America, I'm from Argentina, and to have a country come in in front of your president at a press conference and say, you have problems, you need to fix them. I want to hear what the Guatemalan people have to say about your own problems, when these problems have existed for decades, and we've known that they existed for decades, to suddenly say 5 months into the administration, we now recognize there are these systematic problems in these countries, and we want to donate time and money to help you and have a task force to come in and help you figure out your problems, is preposterous. The whole reason that asylum exists is because there are many countries all over the world, in Africa, Latin America, Asia, you name it, that have a lot of issues, that have a lot of corruption, and those problems will not be solved because the corruption is so high that if you give money to these countries, they're going to keep it and they're not going to apply it to these programs. They are happy for people to leave if that means that they can line their pockets. And so I don't think that it's realistic at all.
A lot of immigration problems under the last administration, and it appears that it's not getting any better anytime soon, at least in the first 5 months of the Biden administration.